the quiet, silent dome of the midnight sky, a cloud of soft, velvet gray hung suspended high above the frozen world. The air at this height was so still and cold that it felt like thin glass, holding the sky in a breathless, frozen embrace. Far below, the dark, jagged outlines of ancient mountains slept under a blanket of deep shadow, their peaks pointing like silent stone fingers toward the distant, twinkling stars. Within the dark heart of the cloud, a gentle moisture began to gather, drawing together in the dark, cold space as if preparing for a quiet winter miracle of creation. The silence of the night was complete, broken only by the faint, distant whispering of the wind as it slipped through the high canyons of ice and stone. It was a space where time seemed to stand still, waiting for the sky to release its frosty treasures. A single breath of frosty, ancient starlight slipped through a small tear in the cloud, touching the gathering moisture with a delicate, icy kiss. At that exact moment, a tiny point of light crystallized in the darkness, forming the beginning heart of a new creation. It was a minute spark of ice, so small that it could have rested on the eyelash of a sleeping woodland bird without being felt or noticed. Yet, within this tiny speck of frost, a quiet consciousness began to wake, feeling the cold air hum around its newly formed, microscopic core. The coldness was absolute, yet there was a soft, silent beauty to the way the crystal began to take shape. It was as if the night itself had decided to write a small story in the medium of frozen water, a story that would soon float down to the earth. The tiny crystal began to grow, extending outward from its center with a slow, deliberate, and beautiful grace. It grew branch by branch, reaching into the damp cloud to pull in more moisture, weaving the cold vapor into solid, shimmering patterns of pure ice. Each arm grew at the exact same pace, forming a perfect, six-fold geometric symmetry that was both incredibly complex and perfectly balanced. It was a design of pure math, winter, and starlight, a tiny masterpiece of frozen geometry that began to shimmer with a pale, pearlescent light in the dark sky. She could feel the faint, rhythmic pulse of the clouds, and the way the moisture clung to her branches. The process was slow and meditative, a calm and natural expansion that followed the ancient laws of winter, creating a structure that was incredibly strong yet incredibly light. This newly formed snowflake was named Lumina, a delicate creature of ice whose edges caught and reflected the faint, blue light of the stars. She was unlike any other flake in the cloud, for her crystalline lattice was exceptionally clear and pure, allowing the starlight to pass through her and glow from within. As she floated gently in the freezing air, her 6 intricate arms vibrated softly with the subtle currents of the upper atmosphere. She was a silent, beautiful work of winter art, suspended in the quiet dark of the sleeping world. Every facet of her small body was polished to a fine sheen, ready to reflect whatever small light found its way into the darkness. She was a tiny, floating jewel in the midnight air, completely content with her silent existence in the high, cold clouds. Lumina drifted in the peaceful womb of the cloud, listening to the soft, rhythmic humming of the high-altitude winds that brushed past her. Around her, millions of other ice crystals were forming and floating, each of them unique, yet all of them sharing the same quiet and cold nature. They spoke to one another in silent, icy vibrations, whispering of the great, frozen landscapes they would soon cover. The other snowflakes dreamed of landing on frozen lakes, of building heavy snowdrifts on rooftops, and of resting in the dark, silent pine forest. They floated together in a silent, slow-moving dance, drifting with the currents of the high sky. Lumina watched them and felt a sense of belonging, yet there was still that tiny spark of difference within her, a quiet curiosity that made her look beyond the gray clouds. While the other crystals were content to dream of the long winter night and the cold ground, Lumina felt a strange, quiet longing stir within her core. It was a gentle curiosity, a soft questioning of the cold world she lived in, wondering if there was more to existence than ice. She listened to the whispers of the clouds and the hum of the cold, but she found herself wishing for something she could not name. She wanted to know what lay beyond the dark, frosty sky and the cold winds of the north. She wanted to understand the source of the wind, and the places where the cold air became warm. Her mind was filled with questions that the other crystals did not care to ask, their thoughts focused only on the simple path of falling and resting on the ground. One evening, a great traveler arrived from the far, dark corners of the northern hemisphere, his voice a roaring, majestic song of ice and stone. It was the north wind, sweeping through the clouds with a wild, chilly energy that shook the quiet snowflakes from their gentle, floating sleep. He carried the sense of frozen seas, of giant glaciers that cracked like thunder, and of vast, dark pine forests that stretched for miles. Lumina drifted close to his cold, rushing currents, eager to hear the tales of his long, sweeping journeys. The wind's breath was wild and free, shaking the clouds and creating a swirling vortex of white frost. Lumina felt a thrill of excitement as she listened to his low, rumbling voice, feeling the energy of his long journey through the cold spaces of the world. The north wind spoke of the freezing peaks he had crossed, and the silent, deep valleys where the snow lay 10 feet deep. But as his voice softened into a gentle, low murmur, he spoke of a legend he had heard from his brother, the warm south wind. He spoke of a land far to the south, a place where the ice melted away and the earth put on a coat of soft green. In this mythical land, known as summer, the air was warm and sweet, filled with the scent of pine and flowers. The wind's voice became a soft lullaby, whispering of a world that seemed impossible to the frozen crystals. He spoke of the warmth with a sense of wonder, as if he, too, had been softened by the gentle touch of the southern air during his long travels. In that distant, warm world, the north wind whispered, the light did not fade into cold darkness, but stayed for long, golden hours. The sun was not a pale, cold circle in the sky, but a warm, glowing heart that bathed everything in a rich, golden light. The earth was soft and damp, filled with the sounds of rushing rivers, humming bees, and the songs of birds that winter had never seen. Lumina listened in absolute wonder, her cold, crystalline body vibrating with the beautiful, warm images of this warm summer. She tried to imagine what it would feel like to be touched by warmth, to lose the sharp, clear edges of her ice and become something soft and flowing. The idea was strange, yet it felt deeply appealing, like a distant memory of a home she had never known. The other snowflakes laughed softly at her interest, their icy voices chiming like tiny glass bells in the cold, thin night air. They warned her that summer was a dangerous, forbidden place for their kind, a land of fire and heat that would destroy them. To touch the warmth, they said, was to invite the end, a quiet dissolving into nothingness where their beautiful shapes would be lost forever. They told her to forget the sun and to dream instead of the silent, frozen valleys that waited below. Their laughter was like the tinkling of ice on a frozen pond, cold and without real malice, just the natural reaction of crystals that knew only the winter. They could not understand her longing, for their own hearts were perfectly aligned with the cold, silent dark. Despite their warnings, the dream of summer took root in Lumina's heart, growing warmer and brighter than the cold, distant stars above. She could not forget the image of the golden light, the soft green grass, and the sweet smell of honey and pine. She wondered if melting was truly an end, or if it was simply a transition to a new, beautiful way of being. She looked down at the dark earth below, wishing she could see the colors of summer with her own eyes. She began to look at the starlight not as a cold, distant fire, but as a promise of the warmth that lay far to the south. She held the dream close to her core, protecting it from the cold winds that tried to sweep it away into the night. As the winter night deepened, the cloud grew heavier and began to sink slowly toward the sleeping, dark world below. The air grew thicker and colder, and the snowflakes knew that the time had come for them to leave their high, quiet home. Lumina felt a gentle pull, a soft gravity that drew her downward into the vast, dark space between the sky and the earth. She prepared herself for the long descent, her crystalline arms shimmering with excitement as she began her journey downward. The clouds seemed to fold inward, preparing to drop their heavy load of snow over the silent valleys and hills. Lumina felt the moment of departure arrive, and she let go of her high home, falling into the dark space with a quiet sense of adventure. With a soft, rushing sigh, the cloud released its frozen children, and a gentle snow began to fall over the quiet, dark landscape. Lumina drifted out into the open sky, leaving the safety of the cloud behind as she floated into the cold night. The sky was a vast, dark ocean, and she was a single, tiny star drifting slowly through the dark, empty space. She felt the cool air rushing past her edges, supporting her weight as she tumbled gently through the dark. The sky felt open and free, a vast playground where she could drift and spin as she pleased. She looked down at the dark, distant shapes of the hills, watching them grow slowly larger as she moved through the cold, silent currents of the night. She rode the soft updrafts of the wind, spinning in a slow, graceful dance that matched the rhythm of the falling snow all around her. All around her, millions of snowflakes fell in silence, creating a soft, whispering sound as they drifted through the cool, crisp air. The world below was a mystery, hidden in the shadows of the night, but Lumina felt no fear as she fell. She kept her focus on the air around her, enjoying the simple, soothing feeling of drifting through the dark. She danced with the other flakes, their paths crossing and parting in a silent, beautiful pattern that covered the sky. There was a peaceful harmony to the fall, a collective movement that felt like a quiet, slow-motion river of white drifting through the dark. The wind carried her through a thick, silent veil of fog that clung to the middle slopes of a great, pine-covered mountain. The fog was damp and cool, wrapping her in a soft, gray blanket that muffled the sounds of the distant valleys below. Lumina floated through the mist, her delicate shape catching the moisture and growing slightly larger, her edges becoming even more intricate. She felt like a traveler in a dream, moving through a quiet, mysterious world of shadow and ice. The mountain seemed to rise up to meet her, its dark slopes covered in a thick coat of green pine trees that stood like silent guardians of the winter. Lumina felt the dampness of the fog cling to her arms, adding new, delicate layers to her shape. As she emerged from the fog, the sharp, clean scent of pine needles rose from the forest below to greet her in the cool air. The scent was cool and deep, smelling of damp earth and frozen wood, a scent that belonged to the winter forest. Lumina looked down and saw the dark tops of the pine trees, their branches laden with heavy, silent white snow. She drifted closer to the trees, attracted by their silent, sturdy presence in the cold, dark night. The scent was a promise of the earth, a reminder that there was a world of life sleeping beneath the heavy snow. Lumina felt her descent slow down as she reached the lower branches, the air becoming slightly more still and sheltered from the wind. She drifted past the upper branches of a towering, ancient pine tree, where a large, silent owl sat perched on a snow-covered limb. The owl was covered in thick, soft feathers that kept him warm against the cold, and he sat perfectly still in the dark. He opened one large, golden eye, watching the silent descent of the white flakes with a calm, wise look. Lumina floated near him, attracted by the warmth and quiet wisdom that seemed to surround the ancient bird. The owl sat like a statue of soft gray and white feathers, his breathing slow and steady in the frosty air. He seemed to be a part of the tree itself, an ancient spirit of the forest that had watched 1,000 snows fall in the quiet night. Lumina landed softly on a frozen pine needle just a few inches from the owl, resting her delicate shape on the dark green wood. The needle was cold and stiff, but it held her securely, allowing her to look closely at the great bird. She felt the soft warmth of his feathers radiating in the air, a warmth that felt strange and wonderful to her. She looked up at his large, golden eye, her crystalline core humming with a quiet, polite question. She felt the rough texture of the pine needle beneath her, a sharp contrast to the soft, smooth air she had been riding. The proximity of the owl was comforting, a source of quiet strength in the vast, cold emptiness of the winter forest. She whispered to the owl, her voice a tiny, icy vibration that was barely louder than the soft sound of the falling snow. She asked him if he had ever seen the warmth of the summer sun, or if he knew of the green forest. The owl turned his head slowly, his golden eye reflecting the pale light of the stars as he looked at her. He sat in silence for a long moment, as if considering the question of the tiny, glowing snowflake. Her voice was a soft sigh of ice, a sound that could easily have been mistaken for the wind rustling the pine needles. She waited in quiet hope, her 6 intricate arms held still as she looked into the deep, golden eyes of the ancient bird. The owl hooted softly, his voice a low, deep rumble that vibrated through the branch and echoed in the quiet forest. He told her that he had indeed seen the summer, many times, during his long years of living in the woods. He described the warmth that soaked into the bark of the trees, and the soft, green moss that covered the ground. He spoke of the bright flowers that bloomed in the meadows, and the warm breeze that blew through the leaves. His voice was like the sound of dry leaves scraping across the snow, old and full of the memories of many seasons. He spoke with a slow, deliberate pace that matched the quiet rhythm of the forest, sharing his memories with the tiny, curious snowflake. But the owl also warned her, his voice gentle but firm, that summer was a place where snowflakes could not live. He told her that the warmth she dreamed of would melt her beautiful shape, turning her into water. To see the summer, he said, she would have to let go of her icy form and dissolve into the earth. Lumina listened quietly, her crystalline heart filled with a mixture of wonder and a strange, calm acceptance of her fate. He spoke of the summer with a soft fondness, remembering the warmth that filled the long, quiet days. Lumina could almost feel the warmth of the sun as she listened, her mind painting pictures of a world filled with green leaves and golden light. She thanked the wise owl for his words, letting go of the pine needle to drift back into the cold winter air. She floated downward through the branches, leaving the ancient bird behind as she continued her slow descent toward the earth. The forest was quiet and still, a sanctuary of peace where the only movement was the falling of the snow. Lumina felt a deep sense of calm, her mind filled with the owl's description of the green forest. The thought of melting did not frighten her, but rather felt like a natural step in her journey, a way to become a part of the warm world she dreamed of. She looked at the old owl and felt a deep gratitude for his honest, gentle words. She drifted down toward a frozen stream that wound its way through the bottom of the quiet, dark valley. The surface of the stream was a solid mirror of thick, dark ice, reflecting the stars and the dark sky above. The stream lay silent and still beneath its winter armor, sleeping through the cold months until the spring would wake it. Lumina hovered just above the ice, listening to the faint, muffled murmur of the water flowing deep below. The descent was even slower now, the air in the deep forest calm and protected by the heavy canopy of the trees. Lumina floated down like a tiny, falling feather, her mind at peace as she moved closer to the silent ground below. She whispered her dream to the sleeping stream, telling of the green leaves and the warm, golden light of the sun. The water below seemed to respond, a low, gurgling sigh rising through the cracks in the ice to greet her. The stream told her that it, too, dreamed of the summer, when it could run free and sing its watery song. It promised her that if she fell, they would meet again in the flowing currents of the warm spring. The ice was dark and thick, but it was not dead, it was simply waiting, holding the water in a safe, quiet sleep until the seasons changed. Lumina felt a connection to the frozen stream, knowing that they both carried the dream of the sun. Lumina felt a change in the air as she drifted further down into the low, sheltered valley of the mountains. The sharp, biting chill of the mountain peaks was beginning to fade, replaced by a softer, gentler touch of air. It was a subtle shift, a whisper of spring that was starting to move through the lowlands, softening the frost. She felt her crystalline structure react to the gentle change, her edges vibrating with a quiet, expectant energy. The sound of the flowing water was a low, soothing lullaby, promising that the winter would not last forever. Lumina felt a sense of comfort in the stream's words, knowing that she would not be alone when the time came to melt. Below her, the ground was beginning to show through the snow, patches of dark brown soil appearing like small islands. The snow in the valley was not as deep as it was on the high peaks, and it was soft and wet. Lumina saw the dark earth, smelling the rich, damp scent of the soil that had been buried for months. She felt drawn to the dark ground, knowing that it was the place where her dream would begin. The air smelled different here, carrying a hint of damp earth and melting frost that belonged to the spring. Lumina felt her body soften slightly, the sharp edges of her crystals losing some of their cold, rigid structure in the gentle air. She saw the first green shoots of grass poking through the melting snow, their tiny blades reaching toward the pale morning sky. They were small and delicate, yet they carried a vibrant life that was completely different from the cold ice. Lumina floated closer, amazed by the bright green color that seemed to glow against the dark mud and white snow. It was the first color of summer she had ever seen, and it was beautiful. The soil was rich and dark, filled with the seeds of the coming summer that were waiting for their turn to grow. Lumina looked down at the dark patches and felt a strong pull, knowing that she was reaching the end of her long, slow fall. A small, dormant flower bud clung to a low bush nearby, its tiny petals folded tightly against the morning cold. The bud was waiting for the warmth of the sun to open, holding its beauty secret until the spring arrived. Lumina drifted toward the bud, feeling a strong connection to this tiny, sleeping promise of life and color. She knew that this bud was the perfect place for her journey to reach its gentle end. They were tiny sparks of life in a cold world, green and fresh against the gray mud and white snow. Lumina felt a soft joy as she watched them, her crystalline arms vibrating with the energy of the life that was starting to wake. Lumina felt her delicate, icy edges begin to soften, her sharp geometric points gently smoothing away in the mild air. The cold starlight was gone, replaced by the pale, warm glow of the rising morning sun that touched the valley. She was not afraid as she felt herself begin to change, for she knew that this was the natural path. She felt a deep, quiet joy, knowing that she was finally close to the summer she had dreamed of. The bud was small and brown, covered in a soft, protective coat that kept the cold air out. It slept in silence, waiting for the gentle touch of spring to wake it and call its beautiful petals out into the warm, golden light of the sun. With a final, graceful swirl in the morning breeze, she landed softly on the very tip of the sleeping flower bud. The contact was gentle, a light touch of ice on the soft, green skin of the dormant plant. Lumina rested there, her clear crystal shape shining in the morning light like a tiny, precious diamond. She felt the warmth of the sun growing stronger, soaking into her body and warming her cold, icy heart. The warmth of the sun was a soft, golden hand that reached down into the valley, melting the frost and warming the cold ground. Lumina felt her body starting to change, her ice turning into soft, clear water in the gentle light. As the sun rose higher in the sky, its warm light touched the flower bud, and Lumina began to melt. She dissolved slowly, her beautiful geometric shape fading into a clear, shining drop of pure, clean water. She did not feel pain or loss, but rather a wonderful sense of freedom, as if she were expanding into something much larger. She was no longer a snowflake, but she was still alive, a drop of morning dew. She rested on the green skin of the bud, a single, perfect drop of water that still held the shape of a snowflake for a brief, beautiful moment. She felt the energy of the plant beneath her, a quiet, growing life that was waiting to wake. The dewdrop rolled slowly down the side of the bud, soaking into the soft, green skin of the sleeping plant. Lumina felt herself drawn into the heart of the bud, carrying the life-giving moisture deep into its dark, secret center. She became a part of the flower, nourishing it and helping it to wake from its long, cold winter sleep. She could feel the dormant life within the plant, waiting to burst forth. The transformation was slow and peaceful, a gentle shedding of her icy coat as she became a soft, clear drop of dew. She felt a wonderful sense of connection to the world around her, no longer separate from the earth and the sky. Days passed, and the sun grew warmer and brighter, melting the remaining snow and filling the valley with light and sound. The flower bud began to swell, growing larger and greener each day as it drank the moisture from the soil. Lumina was there, flowing through the stem and the leaves, a vital part of the plant's growth and life. She felt the excitement of the flower as it prepared to open its petals. She flowed into the dark, secret center of the plant, joining the flow of life that was starting to move through the roots and stem. Lumina felt herself becoming a part of the plant, sharing in its growth and its dream of blooming. One morning, the flower bud opened, unfolding its petals to reveal a beautiful blossom of soft, golden yellow. The flower shone in the green meadow like a tiny sun, its sweet scent filling the warm air of the valley. Lumina was present in every petal, her essence helping to create the bright color and the sweet fragrance that drifted on the breeze. She had helped to bring this beauty into the world, fulfilling her dream. The valley was filled with the sound of rushing water as the streams broke free from their icy armor and ran wild. Lumina felt the warm sap moving through the plant, carrying her upward toward the leaves and the growing bud of the flower. The meadow was now alive with the sounds of summer, just as the wise owl and the wind had described. Bees hummed around the yellow flower, gathering sweet nectar and carrying the scent of summer to other parts of the valley. Birds sang in the branches of the green trees, their melodies bright and cheerful in the warm, golden light. Lumina felt a deep sense of happiness, surrounded by the life she had helped to create. The yellow petals unfolded like a tiny fan, opening wide to catch the warm rays of the sun. Lumina felt a deep sense of pride and joy, knowing that her moisture had helped to create this beautiful, golden bloom in the green meadow. She lived in the yellow flower for many warm, sunny days, experiencing the beauty of the summer from the inside. She felt the gentle breeze shake the petals, and the warm rain wash them clean in the afternoon storms. She watched the butterflies flutter through the meadow, their colorful wings matching the bright flowers that grew all around. It was a world of color and warmth, far beyond anything she had dreamed. The air was warm and still, filled with the lazy humming of insects and the sweet scent of blooming flowers. Lumina lived in the heart of the blossom, enjoying the bright, golden world that she had dreamed of for so long in the cold clouds. As the summer reached its peak, the afternoons grew hot and dry, the sun shining brightly from a clear sky. Lumina felt the heat warming the petals of the flower, drawing the moisture back up toward the surface of the leaves. She felt herself rising through the veins of the plant, moving toward the tips of the petals where the air was warm. She knew that another change was coming, another step in her long journey. She watched the sun rise and set, painting the sky in shades of pink, orange, and gold. The summer was everything she had hoped for, a warm and beautiful sanctuary of life and color that filled her heart with a deep, lasting peace. One hot afternoon, a gentle breeze swept through the yellow flower, and Lumina evaporated into the warm summer air. She rose from the petal as an invisible mist, floating upward into the blue sky on the rising currents of heat. She was lighter than air, drifting higher and higher above the green meadow and the tall pine trees. She looked down at the beautiful valley, seeing the yellow flower shrink to a tiny gold speck. She felt the warm breeze dry the dew on the leaves, and the hot sun draw the moisture back up into the air. Lumina was ready for the next step, knowing that her journey was not finished, but was simply moving into a new phase. She floated high above the mountains, joining millions of other vapor drops to form a soft, white summer cloud. The cloud was warm and fluffy, drifting slowly across the blue sky on the gentle currents of the summer wind. Lumina was part of the sky now, looking down at the green world below and feeling a deep sense of peace. She had seen the summer, she had lived in it, and now she was sky. She rose on the warm currents of the afternoon air, a tiny, invisible speck of mist that floated upward into the blue sky. She felt a wonderful sense of lightness, as if she were a part of the wind itself, moving freely through the vast sky. From her high vantage point in the summer cloud, she watched the seasons change, the green meadows slowly turning to gold. The leaves on the pine trees remained green, but the deciduous trees put on coats of red and orange. The air grew cooler, and the warm winds of summer were replaced by the brisk breezes of autumn. Lumina watched it all with a calm, quiet interest, knowing that the circle would continue. She drifted with the cloud, watching the shadows of the white hills of vapor move across the green earth below. It was a beautiful, peaceful existence, suspended between the earth and the sky in a world of pure light and soft, white mist. The autumn days grew shorter and colder, the sun sinking lower in the sky and shining with a pale, cool light. The white clouds grew gray and heavy, gathering moisture as the temperature dropped in the upper atmosphere. Lumina felt the cool air beginning to freeze her vapor once again, drawing the moisture together into tiny droplets. She felt the familiar, gentle pull of the winter sky, preparing her for another transformation. The green fields turned to yellow and brown, and the leaves on the trees began to fall, covering the ground in a carpet of gold. Lumina watched the slow transition from her high home, feeling the cooling air of the autumn night. A cold wind from the north blew through the gray cloud, and Lumina felt the moisture within her freeze once more. She crystallized in the cold air, her vapor turning back into a tiny, solid point of sparkling ice. She grew branch by branch, extending her 6 arms in the familiar, perfect geometric symmetry of her snowflake form. She was Lumina again, a beautiful creation of ice and starlight, ready to fall to the earth. The sky grew dark and heavy with gray clouds, and the wind from the north began to blow with a cold, sharp bite. Lumina felt her vapor starting to condense, the cold air drawing the moisture back together into small, tight droplets. But she was not the same snowflake she had been before, for she carried the memory of the summer in her core. She remembered the warmth of the sun, the green of the grass, and the sweet scent of the yellow flower. Her crystalline shape shimmered with a unique, warm golden light that set her apart from the other white flakes. She was a snowflake that had known the summer, and she was beautiful. The crystallization was a familiar, soothing process, a return to the geometric beauty of her snowflake form. She felt her 6 arms extend into the cold air, each one forming a perfect, intricate pattern that reflected the cold, pale light. She drifted out of the gray cloud, falling gently through the cold autumn sky toward the waiting earth below. The world was quiet and still, preparing for the long winter sleep that would soon cover the land in white. Lumina fell in silence, her golden-tinted arms catching the pale light of the cold sun as she floated downward. She felt a deep sense of purpose, knowing that her journey was part of a larger circle. She shimmered with a soft, pearlescent glow that was different from the cold, white light of the other flakes. She carried the warmth of the summer sun in her very core, a tiny gold spark that made her unique among the millions of winter crystals. She landed softly on the branch of an ancient pine tree, resting near the same spot where the wise owl had perched. The owl was there, his feathers thick and warm, watching the first snow of the season with his golden eye. He looked at the tiny, gold-tinted snowflake resting on the needle, his wise eye showing a spark of recognition. Lumina vibrated softly, sending a message of warmth to the old, quiet bird. The mountain peaks were already white, and the trees were standing silent and bare in the cold air. Lumina floated down through the gray sky, her golden-tinted shape spinning gently in the slow, silent dance of the first winter snow. She told him that she had seen the summer, and that it was more beautiful than he had described. She had lived in the yellow flower, she had flown as mist, and she had become a part of the summer sky. The owl hooted softly in response, a low, warm sound that seemed to welcome her back to the winter forest. Lumina felt a deep contentment, resting on the cold needle in the quiet woods. The old owl sat in his usual place, his feathers ruffled against the cold wind as he watched the forest turn white. He seemed to recognize the tiny, gold-tinted flake that landed near him, his golden eye softening in the quiet winter night. She knew that she would melt again when the spring returned, and that she would live in the flowers once more. She would flow in the streams, rise into the clouds, and fall again as snow in the endless circle of the seasons. She was a part of the earth, a part of the water, and a part of the sky, forever changing yet always remaining herself. The dream of summer was no longer a dream, but her life. The owl sat in silent understanding, his low rumble of a hoot welcoming her back to the quiet woods. Lumina rested on the pine needle, feeling the coldness of the winter but also the warmth of the memory she carried inside. As the winter night fell over the forest, Lumina closed her eyes and drifted into a quiet, peaceful sleep. The snow fell softly around her, covering the branches and the ground in a thick, warm blanket of silent white. She slept, dreaming of the warm sun, the green grass, and the yellow flowers that would bloom in the spring. She was safe, she was warm, and she was home in the quiet heart of the winter. She was a part of the great cycle of the earth, a tiny thread in the beautiful, endless web of the seasons. She knew that her path would always lead back to the sun, and she was happy to wait in the quiet dark of the winter.